Good afternoon. Hello to everyone. So I'm going to talk about exploring scalable strategies for advancing Canada's net zero ambitions. So the structure of my presentation is basically the timeline of the climate change commitments by Canada. So far, lots of announcements, so I'm going to touch upon all. Canada's 2030 emission reduction plan, also sector-wise, there are some plans already in place, so I'm going to talk about that. Canada's greening power grid, power sectors already ahead of the curve, so we'll talk about that in terms of decarbonization pathways. And we'll talk about Canada GHG emission profile, the snapshots, Canada's oil and gas sector, and the road transport sector. These are the very important and lots of scope there that how to decarbonize. Then I will talk about the economy and environment, the synergies, how important it is, because we have already the Sustainable Development Goal, and UN Brundtland Commissions. They all talk about the energy, environment, as well as economy, so we cannot ignore that part. And then we'll talk about the clean energy transition, and within the clean energy transition, I will talk about the biofuel economy in Canada, waste to energy, Canada's EV transition, and provincial variations and subnational provincial modeling, how important it is to find out the decarbonization pathways, whether it is on track or it is not good for the economy, as well as some concluding remarks from my end. So that's the whole structure of my presentation. So let's start. So you see that the timeline of Canada's climate commitments, April 28, 1998, the then Prime Minister, Liberal Prime Minister, actually came up with a 6% below legally binding accord, committed Canada to cut its carbon emission by 6% below its 1990 baseline by the end of 2012. That's how it started. And then we had a Kyoto Protocol Implementation Act. Canada's target is to reduce GHGs an average 6% below its 1990 emission level over the 2008 to 12. And then total GHG emissions by 60 to 70% by 2050 after that. And that is also repeated in the 2008 and 2009 climate change plans. And then we had Paris Agreement in 2016, where commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emission by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. And as you know, across the world, every country is coming up with the nationally determined commitments, NDC, and Canada is also there. So the NDC commitment to reduce emissions by 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2030. And that is a substantial increase of the ambition beyond Canada's original NDC, and that previously communicated upon ratifying the Paris Agreement in 2016. So that's actually the timeline of climate commitments. I think all of you know, but just to, as a snapshot, you can get a better pictures like how the commitments works and where exactly we are. So different plans we have, the emission reduction plan. So if you look at from the agriculture, service sectors, industries, they have different reduction plan. So the agriculture sectors you see reduce NTO, the fertilizer emissions by 1.6 million tons CO2 by 14%. Definitely the farmers already informed and they are into place how to go about it, maybe organic fertilizer or like organic farming. Second, if you look at the reduce energy cost for homes and buildings, like green buildings. So investment already in place, 150 million green building strategies. And if you look at the electric vehicles, like target of achieving 60% batteries electric vehicles by 2030 and 100% by 2035. Same in case of oil and gas sector, emission reduction by 31% below 2005 levels in 2030. So pretty much touching upon all the sectors in the economy. There are different reduction plans already. Let's look at the power sector, which is very important, and also Canada is blessed with the hydropower, most of the provinces. So if you look at 75% of the electricity comes from the non-emitting sources, largely from the hydropower. And if you look at SDG 7, clean and affordable energy, so to some extent that serves the power sector. And minimal scope for decarbonizing the power sector, because already 75% if you have a cleaner, but if you go to the different provinces, look at the status of different provinces, you see that there is a huge differences. So I will take you there. Before that, just an economy side of it, energy sector contributes nearly 10% of Canada's GDP and directly employs nearly 900,000 Canadians actually working. So employment generation is very much there, and it absorbs a lot of labors in the power sector. If I look at the provincial scenarios, some provinces are not good. You see Nunavut as well as Alberta, Saskatchewan, they still have a coal and coke, so 36 and 41%, and Nova Scotia 52%. And so this is a kind of a red flag for those regions, and there is a scope to reduce emissions. Next, we have GHG emission profile. If you look at the GHG emissions, mainly coming from oil and gas sector, transport sector, electricity not that much, and a little bit of agriculture is also there, waste to energy is also there. But the most important is oil and gas sector and the transport sector. So these are the two sectors one has to think about what will be the decarbonization pathways, how can we reduce the emission from these two sectors. That's the key currently in Canada. So next, I am going to show you the oil and gas sector. That is just to give you a little bit of profile, 4th largest producer of oil and 6th largest producer of natural gas in the world. So oil and gas sector, you can imagine it's huge for Canada, billions of dollars contributing to GDP, and lots of labor also working in the oil and gas sector. But thinking about what kind of decarbonization pathways for the oil and gas sector, so I'm not a scientist, an economist, so just the way of thinking is maybe scientists can say a lot about that and very micro level, but I'm a macroeconomist, so from my point of view, low carbon hydrogen driven from natural gas instead of coal, because coal is a hard to abate sector, is a very important to introduce. Low carbon biofuel production, that is also an alternative to the fossil fuels. And portfolio of diversifications also, there are a lot of opportunities in the oil and gas in different phases when they produce. And already some of the companies are into place how to introduce alternate energies, and renewable energy is one of them. So they are thinking about that. Next is transport sector. If you look at the transport sector contributes 2nd largest share of GHG emissions in Canada. And but in the economic side, if you look at the transportation and warehousing sectors constitute 3.6% of Canada's GDP and 5.2% of the Canada's workforce. So why I'm bringing all these economic aspects here? Because government is thinking about the environmental pollution, how to reduce. whatever the path, but we cannot ignore the economic side of it, because already in the UN SDG, all the strategies and goals, we have to comply with all these things, and economic part is very important for that. So next is Canada's Transtrack. If you look at the 36.7% GHGs coming from the transport sector, which is approximately 8.7% of GHG emissions in Canada. So it's a huge emission from the tracking sectors. That's a transport. And the government has already announced its ambitious plan for the battery electric vehicle by 2035 across all transport vehicle categories. So that's already the strategies in place. So how to go about that, that's the key. So here, just to take a minute, like as I am saying, that only focusing on the energy, alternative energy, and for that the environmental emissions, whatever the pathways one should choose for, and what will be the sensible pathways. So here comes the synergy between economy, energy, and environment. So economic growth, one has to think about also side by side when you offer any kinds of solutions. And GDP growth is very important in that way. Yes, of course, you can think about like whether how much, not the real GDP growth, but also the green GDP in that way. That is also another ways to look at the things, whether we are on the right track or not, and how much you are spending on that, and what will be the health impacts, what will be the other indirect impacts. That is also very important to look at. And for that, I would like to mention about the system of national accounts. That is very important, because whenever we offer any solution, one sector we are offering solution, but that will affect on the other sectors of the economy. One cannot ignore that. So in that case, system of national accounts is a very useful tool to measure all these things whenever we offer any kinds of solutions. So I just want to mention all these things in this context. Now let's move on to the SDG. So as we are talking about the energy environment, so SDG 7, all of you know, we have 17 goals. So basically, these all energy environment case, SDG 7, SDG 8, SDG 13, 14, as well as the SDG 12. So all are directly responsible, but pretty much all of the other SDGs also indirectly responsible for all these things. Any action we take for this decarbonization, that will affect the all other SDGs indirectly. So direct 4, 5, but the rest of the others indirectly impacted. So here you see the 26th SDG index rank, Canada. And SDG index score is 78.5. How to calculate the SDG index score? It is all over SDG score, whatever in Canada, the 17 SDG scores. If you have an average of that, that will be the 78.5. That is the index score. And the third one is spillover score. Spillover score you see 68.7. And how to calculate the spillover score is whatever the action you are taking in Canada, that will have an impact on the other economy, neighboring economy or other economies where you have trade. So one has to be very careful, like whatever the actions you are taking, maybe that will have not a good impact on the other economy. So that's why spillover score is very important also to look at in this context. So Canada's score is 68.7. So that is, now we are moving to the clean energy transition. So clean energy transition, we have a couple of things. In case of oil and gas, you see that SDG 7, as I said, the stagnation in SDG 7 from the heavy forward linkages of the oil and gas sector, increasing demand in the electricity and the industrial sector. So Canada's 2023 progress report they have already outlined some emission reduction plan and also cap for the oil and gas sector, because there are different strategies, alternative fuel, alternative, kind of phasing out of something. So all these kind of plans are in place. But the important part here is that oil and gas sectors fetch a lot of revenues. So one has to think about like how to, go about it, like whether it is a sensible solutions or not. So whether maybe the short to medium run, it will be a problem, but may not be the long run. But long run, everything will be good. But for the short and medium term also, the energy security as well as economic sustainability, one has to, look at before taking any strategies. Okay, sorry. Clean energy transitions for natural gas. So for natural gas, we have demand for natural gas for electricity generation expected to increase because as we are looking for the alternative, so definitely it's cleaner, much cleaner than the oil and gas. But also we are thinking of another key alternatives to the intermittent renewable resources because couple of regions in Canada, like some provinces, they are trying out solar and wind and other waste to energy. I will go in a minute about the waste to energy as well. So all these kinds of energies they are trying out, but those are not a kind of a smooth because you have lots of breaks. So in that case, for the smooth run of this electricity or the grid functioning properly, so we need like a kind of a natural gas or oil and gas, whatever, the conventional energy. So that's why I think in that way, natural gas also plays a very important role in Canadian economy. And also low carbon hydrogen from gray, green, and blue. So all the hydrogen cases also, the natural gas plays a very important role. So that way we can have a decarbonized grid. The next is heavy industry case. So heavy industries case also cement and metal smelting sectors, also highly emission intensive. So in that case also, the government already have a couple of alternative solutions for the heavy industries, cement and particularly cement and metal smelting industries. And so the energy and emission intensive nature of the upstream activities, mainly two phases, raw material acquisition and the manufacturing phase. So for that, they are offering all kinds of renewable gas and low carbon hydrogen, so that you can reduce a little bit of emissions from there. Now next, I will take you to the biofuel, which is more promising in that way. So it's going on for a while because already there are E5, B3, 3%, 5%, all this percentage of ethanol biodiesel is going on. But I did some work on the ethanol and biodiesel way back. And basically looking at the Canada's commitment of ethanol and biodiesel sector, if it actually in place, then what will be the impact on the whole economy? So as an economist, I always look for that what will be GDP growth, what will be the other sectors growth, what will be the emission reduction, as well as what are the other strategies we can offer here, given the reduction in GDPs or reduction in employment. So all these factors also taken into account in the study. So we found that ethanol and biodiesel, if we just top up, whatever we have, we just top up, that will definitely good for the economy. And that will be GHG reduction as well. And most importantly, the agriculture sectors positively affected. And because of the feedstock is going into the biofuel production. Service industries also impacted. Finance, insurance, transportation services, considerable impact. And but if we go 20% emission reduction strategies, we look at in the other side of the story. Like suppose I want to reduce 20% from the transportation sector emission, then how much your ethanol and biodiesel needed and what will be the blending rate. So we looked at, and it is quite a big number. It's ethanol 23, E23, and B12. So that means that blending rate from the biodiesel should be 12%, and ethanol should be 23%. Then only you can reduce 20% emission from the transportation sector. So that's a study. I did that in 2017. So a couple of years back, but in recent period also, one can take up all these studies to check like what the government of Canada is coming up with all kinds of strategies. One can easily plug into the model to see that how sensible it is and what will be the impact on the economy. So, but in my study, I didn't cover the land use changes. I didn't cover the biodiversity, deforestation, as well as other kinds of CO2 sequestration, but that is also very important, one cannot ignore. So if you take into account all these other aspects, where the numbers will be, what will be the GDP, that is not there. So that's questionable. Now, waste to energy, if you see, so waste to energy is also very popular. Biodiesel, ethanol, whatever from the feedstock or sugarcane molasses, vegetable cooking oils, animal fats, these are very important, source. And one can have the energies also for that, recycle, reuse, and reduce. British Columbia is already way ahead of the curve, and they have the reduce, reuse, recycle, recovery, and residual management. And recently, they have a BC toolkit also, where they are measuring the methane gas. And also Ontario also waste to energy plant with a power purchase agreements 20 years with the Ontario Power Authority. So Ontario and British Columbia is already thinking about that waste to energy, and they have already a couple of measures in that way already in place. Now Canada's EV transition, that is also very promising in that way, EV transition. So here I would like to talk about the electric vehicles, because already 2035, 100% battery electric vehicle sales by 2035 already in place. So recently one of my students, just last year, he was looking at if the national level, if EV, 35%, like 100% battery electric vehicle, if in place, what will be the impact on the economy? So we looked at and we found that output, GDP, and employment, you see 0.69%. This is quite, encouraging, as well as one should think about more and more like that. 0.9% GDP, as well as 0.33%, employment. So all these cases, it's a win-win for all of us, I would say. Intersectoral impacts also, mineral fuels, metal ores, all these other sectors of the economy will also boost up because of the electric vehicle. And also, that is substantial, and GHG savings also substantial. Now, one caveat is here. So when I say like mineral fuel, metal ores, concentrate, chemical product, transportation services, so basically the transport sector, you are replacing EVs. So that way you are using cleaner energy sitting in Quebec, you have hydro. But if that is in Alberta and Saskatchewan, you will have more conventional energy usage in the electricity vehicle charging, because the charging station will get the same conventional energy. So one has to think about, like when I am offering this kind of solutions, finally, what it comes. Like, is it coming like, okay, in case of Quebec, hydro, so more hydro will be used, so there is no pollution in that way. But in case of Alberta and Saskatchewan, it will be more pollution through charging, because they have a conventional energy. So these are all the things one have to take into account. There are provincial variations. That's what I am talking, provincial variations, because one kind of, strategies cannot be applied to all the provinces unless you have like all streamlined and all of them are using the similar kind of energy So that needs to be, always to think about before suggesting anything. So tailor-made net zero action plan, natural resource endowments and the regional economic structures is there in the provincial level. In the Ontario, highest provincial populations and GDP, reduction potential 30% of its aim, clean manufacturing hub through its low carbon hydrogen strategy, as well as increase in renewable gas content and industrial coal phase out. So Ontario, they have their plan. So different provinces came up with their plan. So Ontario, they have a very good plan and a structured plan. Alberta, given the conventional sources of energy a lot, so 57% share of GHG emission from oil and gas sector, they installed 25 carbon capture utilization storage hubs that help to decarbonize the petrochemical plant, oil and gas refining industries. In case of Quebec, it's better because we have hydropower 93% and decarbonization strategies in other sectors of the economy, like a new gasoline-powered vehicle by 2035. That is very important for Quebec, so Quebec into it, and 50% reduction in building heating. So Quebec strategy is more focusing on the electric vehicle and also focusing more on the transport sector. So electric vehicle as well as the green building. So 50% reduction in building heating emissions. So British Columbia, always in the forefront in implementing carbon pricing. So they are very big into the carbon pricing. So they have a strategy like within such a period, 2023 to 2030, they would like to increase the carbon price from $65 to $170. So that way the transport and oil and gas sectors emission reductions possible, 57%. And also the carbon intensity from diesel and gasoline fuels by 30% by 2030. That's their strategy. So British Columbia. Now what I talked about, when any government coming up with any kinds of strategies, whether the strategy is good or where exactly that strategies will take you, whether it is a sensible strategies, whether it is good for the economy or not, what exactly will be the condition of the labor, so whether there will be a scope for employment generation or not. So all this factor comes together, you have to think about the economic modeling. So any strategies when we, promote or we want to apply or implement, then one has to think about what is the other impact in the economy. So towards that end, this economy, energy, environment modeling is very, very important for us to look at and to do some exercise with. So we developed with the Cambridge, UK, that's a big model called energy, economy, environment model. And that all over Europe, it's quite famous. And only for the climate change issues, decarbonization pathways in different countries in the world, like whatever the strategy is coming up, just to quickly look at like whether this model is working for and what will be the impact on other sectors of the economy, what will be the impact on all other macroeconomic factors like GDP, output, employments, and so on and so forth. So all these things comes together, modeling is so important. So we did that for European Union as a whole called E3ME, and we have another model just recently in India also. I applied the same model build up the same model for India. And what is the interesting feature of this model is, it is a macroeconometric dynamic simulation model, because people often criticize about the static model, but this is a macroeconometric dynamic simulation model. That way it is quite safe, and the results is also sensible results. And another most important thing about the model is, you will see the forecast, and whatever you are suggesting today, so it will take you to 2050, that what will be the impact on the economy in 2050 if we start this policy today. So that kind of analysis you can do, and it's quite famous in all over Europe. And recently in USA also working on that. And another interesting feature of the model is region, not like a national level, because as you see in Canada, we have Alberta, Saskatchewan, Nunavut, and other parts. They are still using the conventional energy, but other parts of Canada is using very clean energy. So in that case, what will be the substitute? So one has to come up with the regional model so that you can capture all the different regions, their features, and then you can suggest some solutions, not like a tailor-made one-size-fits-for-all kind of a solution. So that's why this model is very, very important. So we did that for India as well as all over Europe. So here are all the model descriptions of different models. You see, Government of Canada is also into it, and Environment Climate Change Canada in particular, they are continuously working on that, different kinds of model, because decarbonization pathways they are very, very serious about, and they are looking at using those kind of models. They are also trying to find out which model is perfect to find out the impact of all these decarbonization strategies or the climate change solutions. So model part is very, very important for that. There are different national and subnational models, and Environment Climate Change Canada, Statistics Canada, they are very much involved into the process. So here I have some conclusion. Looking at, first I would like to say one-size-fits-all solution doesn't hold. The second is 3 economy, energy, environment dimensions is very important. One should take simultaneously all economy side, environment side, as well as energy side as well. And moving forward with UN SDG goals. And holistic view is very important for the decarbonization pathways for determining and implementing solutions. Another thing is that short run and medium run, it is very important, because when we suggest something, maybe in the short run it will right away not give you the solutions, also may not be good for GDP or employment, but if we wait for a few years, then it will be really good for the economy. So some strategies may be good for the long run, but not for the short run. But some strategies right away will show you something, but that may not be good for the long run as well. So both ways there. So one has to be very careful about what kind of policies we are suggesting, which provinces good for, what kind of policies good for which provinces. So oil and gas sector, as I mentioned already, that it's a huge revenue generates. So oil and gas sectors in Alberta, if government is coming up with really a fast-track reduction plan from the oil and gas sector, one has to think about that, whether it is good for the economy or not. So I would suggest the market-based solutions, like technological upgradation on the one hand, to carbon pricing, need to be administered such that the public-private cooperation is needed for that, and public-private partnership model is very important for that, because oftentimes it happens that whenever government gives subsidies, it's not always possible also to government move along with the subsidy, but that time the private intervention is very much needed. So that kind of model is important to come up with a very good solutions for the economy like Canada. And also alternatives such as your environment economic sustainability, that is the very important thing one has to think about, whether it is also economically sustainable or not. So that's it. So these are all the references I have used to prepare my slides. And thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.